Hello, and welcome to Millennial Anti-Terrorizers. And today we're going to be talking about criminal charges, drug use, and good old-fashioned guardhouse lawyer advice. And our first question is going to be to Beth. Beth, how many individuals in your unit use tobacco, caffeine, soda, nicotine, basically tobacco products?
Um, there's a lot of smokers in my unit. I'm not gonna lie. So with that being said, and not if they're not smoking, they're also dipping. B motor T, because we're driving so much, we don't get smoke breaks. So I used to see a lot of the guys who would dip and stuff like that. So tobacco was a big deal, especially around motor T when we had to drive all the hours, whether in state or out or back in Iraq or something like that. So yeah, it was pretty heavy.
What about you, Alex? In your unit, how many people used, tobacco or caffeine products?
Yeah, Alex.
I'm sorry, Jared. I totally fucked that up. Jared,
No, you're all right.
yeah, okay. Jared, how many people in your unit would you say used caffeine and nicotine products?
I think there was only probably two out of 1,000 that did not use anything. Um, I bet you I've seen over half my platoon dip, smoke, have tobacco gum, and a nicotine patch on all at the same time while drinking a fucking caffeine drink. I mean, it's pretty bad. It, I don't know, like Beth was saying, when you're in those vehicles and it's a high strung job and there's always stress, I think it's just you kind of like you could come to the unit and not smoke. And by the time you leave the unit, you will have been a professional smoker. Like it's so stressful and it's an easy way to just kind of get by.
Like being in an infantry unit, they say you need 6 hours of sleep to regenerate your brain. So they authorize 6 hours of sleep. Well, your platoon commander and your platoon sergeant get 6 hours of sleep, and your senior Marine corporals, they get 6 hours of sleep. But the junior Marines, you have fire watch in the middle of the night where you're just keeping an eye on everybody. Nobody gets drug off with by a mountain lion or whatever it is. And with Firewatch, you could have it two different times. So that means you wake up two different times. You get 4 hours of sleep out of the six. And, it's not you do 2 hours at once, it's 1 hour at a time. So you wake up two separate different times, and that's Firewatch. So if you're on Firewatch, you can't smoke cigarettes, you got to dip. You can't do soda. You get your coffee grounds from your Marine, you eat your coffee grounds or something like that, try to wake up. There's many different ways to go about it. And it was the same thing in our grunt units. I would say over 80% use nicotine products or caffeine products for sure. Everybody pretty much used caffeine products, but back then they didn't have Monsters, so we just did the 20-ounce Pepsi, Cokes, Mountain Dew. That's something you could throw in your cargo pocket, and then afterwards, like let's say you're out four, you could use your 20-ounce Pepsi can bottle as a improvised uh, Tabasco bomb in the field, but
Yeah.
they changed the MRE so the packets aren't as good.
So something I totally forgot about, not only because you guys always were around the males, us the females, some of them would actually like because if they didn't even smoke, they just dipped. We had this one female, she was always dipping all the time just because she was always doing a lot of hours on the road, but I don't know. I could never get into tobacco myself. I was gonna say that, but if it wasn't that, even like we had another guy just before even going for a run early in the morning back from the bars, he would light a cigarette, drink a Mountain Dew, and start running, cough up a lung, get done, and then drink a Red Bull or some kind of energy drink that he would have on hand. But it's just like that's how we would function every time.
Most definitely, most definitely. Okay, next question, Beth. How many unit members drank too much or drank in Iraq and Afghanistan? And I mean, these are your binge drinkers where they're drinking continuously throughout the barracks.
Come on, there it goes. Sorry. So yeah, we had quite a few of those, and a lot of them. It started off with just because we drink on the weekends. We all know what we do when we get paid. And by the time the weekday came, they were still kind of bored when it came into coming off of work. So you catch them always drinking all the time. So it's just we had a couple of them. It ended up becoming pretty depressing for them, and just they didn't know how to like learn about their emotions. So it was just like we caught them with a bottle of like alcohol, not beer, in a hand or something like that. They'd be chugging a bottle a night almost. Seeing some of these guys, or it's even just a competition. It wouldn't even be somebody who's just depressed. It's just it was always a game and seeing who can get the drunkest the fastest or something like that. And he's like, who's got a bigger ego? Who can hold their liquor the most? Because again, it wasn't always beer. It was always Southern Comfort these guys would get. So they would each get their own bottle of Southern Comfort and then maybe a chaser with 7-Up or something. But it was just, yeah, straight comfort the whole night. And they had that bottle done one night and they would rotate this the next night. And that's just, yeah, how their livers would function, I don't know.
How about you, Brody?
So, yeah, like we had a lot of drinking, a lot of drinking. We weren't supposed to drink at all, but there was many times I had to carry people back onto post. In the mornings before PT, we would actually, me and my buddy would give IV saline bags. We had to do one guy in particular quite often. But they would show up to PT and still be able to function. So I mean, there's a lot of guys that were professional drinkers. Like, what do they call them? Like the guys who keep
Functional
working.
alcoholics.
Yeah, functional alcoholics.
Hey, Robin, I'm a functioning alcoholic, which is you can be one. It's like being a paraplegic lap dancer. You can do it, just not as well as the others, really.
Deployed or anything like that? No, I didn't see anything. I mean, I seen some drugs over in Afghanistan, but that was about it.
Yeah. Okay. With me, when we were boots, you were only allowed to have, if you were of age to drink in the barracks, each Marine's only allowed, I believe it's a 6-pack per Marine, or I think per room it was 2.5 bottles of wine per 2 Marines or something like that. And they didn't even sell hard liquor at the PX. You had to go to the NEX, Navy Exchange, and that's where you could buy your heavy liquor and everything like that. Now, I didn't drink so much my first year and a half, 2 years in on base. It wasn't until I was 21 to where I started drinking on base. And when I drank, I remember they were nasty. Blue Star, I think. Sky Blue vodka. They had those in the 6-pack, and like I still can't believe I drank those things. Those things were so nasty, make you want to puke.
It's like
Because
Zima.
they were stronger in alcohol than the beer, and I was too lazy to get on the bus and take the 20-minute bus ride down to the NEX and get a bottle of whiskey, which I'm not allowed to have in the barracks to begin with, which is some bullshit. But I did know one guy, he got like a mini keg. There, I don't know how many gallons. It's a 3-gallon or something like that or whatever. And he hid that from room inspections for a couple weeks while he drank that.
I think we had something different than you guys too, because being in Germany, the legal drinking age is like if you can see over the bar counter, you can fucking buy.
I love you, man. No, man, I love you.
Those circus midgets cannot hold their booze.
So like you got all these 18-year-olds that are coming over, and all of a sudden they don't have to worry about showing ID or anything like that, like in the States. So it kind of like it got out of control. I mean, drinking was out of control
Sure did.
for our unit.
Well, okay, I remember hearing something about you could be 16 in England in the 90s and drink, right? So could you be 16 and drink in Germany at the same time when you were there?
I'm not joking. You would go into bars and there would be 9-year-olds drinking. Okay?
So how do you pick up a chick in a bar in Germany without checking her fucking ID.
That was a huge deal. No, it really was a huge deal because you would go out to these clubs and they have like dance, nightclubs and shit like that. And you had to be like super careful because like you do not want that kind of shit showing up on your military record. So it was like we pretty much, would stay away from that unless they could show you their ID.
Oh man.
Like I've straight up asked for girls' IDs. Like I have to make sure that you're over the age of 18.
It's funny.
I don't blame you. Okay. Here's the next question for you, Beth. Was there any heavy drug use in your unit or any drug use that was caught by your chain of command?
The harshest drug was really just marijuana for us. Some of the guys would pop on piss tests if they went home on leave and come back because they smoked or something like that. And then later on in my career, when I started becoming the legal clerk, that's when spice was coming out, those bath salts and all that. And that's when people started talking about that. Again, it's always when they were on leave, never really within like the area of North Carolina or Cherry Point. But yeah, they were always having to do piss tests. I remember this one guy coming into the unit. He was constantly in trouble all the time for one, not being back on time, but also just he was always popping on the urinalysis that they would give us. So yeah, they ended up kicking him out early. So with a lot of the legal stuff that happens, that's what was going on is the drugs and stuff that were going on with this, especially the spice. I've had to let go a lot of people. Like they didn't play.
How about you, Brody? Was there any heavy drug use in your unit, or was there any, drugs that chain of command pretty much found window?
Yeah, so we had a couple instances. I mean, like the marijuana, they would do piss tests, and some of the guys, I guess, did smoke like the day after the piss test. So they eventually figured that out, and we would get like a piss test 3 days after a piss test to catch them. But that was mostly Article 15s, just take some pay for a while. But when I got to my unit, there was this NCO that I had to stay with for a week in transit and all that. And this fucker was an asshole to me. I mean, just complete asshole. Ordered me around to go get us food and shit like that. And I didn't know any better. When I actually got to my unit, I asked them like who the hell that was. And they're like, oh yeah, he got brought up on charges for cocaine. He's headed to Leavenworth. And I'm like, you fucking kidding me? This piece of shit ordering me around and he's going to prison. So that was right away in my unit. And then the only other thing I ever seen was in Afghanistan. We heard this ruckus outside the little bee huts that we were in. And I go outside and I see this dude just completely obliterated. And I thought he was drunk at first, but there's no like liquor. So I was kind of curious on what the hell it was. So we go down there and he actually had needles and like heroin and all that shit. And he was fucked up. I mean, he was crawling, just hot, like screaming, hollering, and all that kind of shit. And, if it would have been like he was drunk, I probably would have got him back to his barracks and then just kind of called it good, But with the needles and all that shit, I'm like, nah, fuck this dude. His ass is, he needs punishment. So, yeah, we nailed him to the cross.
That's good.
It was quite interesting because there was some heavy big meth things went on like the first 4 months of me being in the infantry when I finally went to my unit there in 2001. And one of them, 2 months in, one of the senior Marines and his wife were cooking meth on base in their base housing. And they were using the new Marines, the new young Marines that had only been in the unit for 2 months to distribute it. And NCIS caught wind of it, and like all these guys went to jail. And the one that ratted didn't go to like Leavenworth. He went to like he stayed at Camp Pendleton for a while. And then he like went out to like county jails for a while or something like that. But when they finally released him after 4 years, where the other guys got like 20 years, I actually had to take care of him because I was a Marine and I was a corporal, and they gave me duty where I had to keep an eye on this guy for 3 days before they kicked him out because they had to have all his paperwork ready to go. And so he told me the whole shebang about it. And then the second one, this all happened within my first 4 months, was this guy, he had already gotten in trouble for going into like a Radio Shack or some place where they sold CDs and like a music store, record store. And he went in there and he stole a CD that was $25, but he only had like $15 in his pocket and he didn't have a debit card. So because he actually didn't have the amount of money to pay for it, that means he went in there with the intent of stealing. And that was a completely separate, different charge. Pass forward or jump 2 months from this, or a month from this, he decides to go UA. He jumps over the wall, fucking goes out in town. He starts hanging out with these meth heads. They rough up this old lady. They steal her car, take off the license plate, and I shit you not, they fucking take a piece of cardboard with fucking a Sharpie and make a fake license plate. Drive 20, no, not even like 10 miles from where this all went down to the nearest rest stop on Interstate 5, which is right by Camp Pendleton. Because when you go by Camp Pendleton, it's like 20 miles or 18 miles of just high interstate next to the base, and there's only one rest stop. They went to that rest stop, did their fucking drugs, passed out. CHP found them within hours. And these two things all just happened within the first 4 months of me being in the unit. And I'm like, Jesus fucking Christ, who the fuck are these idiots? You know?
Right? It does sound crazy.
All right. Beth.
Yes.
Anyone you knew had charges or kicked out or gone to prison? You know, it doesn't have to be drugs, but just anything that they had charges that they had to go to the brig or something.
There's a couple of them. If anything, there was guys who would always get accused of rape, whether they did it or not. They would always still go to the brig. So there was times they had to do something like that, where I know there was a corpsman that got accused of it. Thank God he didn't have to go, but just stuff like that always kind of came up about. But we did have another person, not in my unit. This is a story I heard from somebody else because it was a grunt unit down in Lejeune. They were big on more of the cocaine and stuff like that, but because again, he was distributing it to like the other troops and stuff like that. They like definitely put him in the brig for the longest time. But I think I've shared a story like that too. I was actually around it, and I'm like, it's. I think they go through so much more than like what I've gone through being an air winger. I feel like the drugs are a lot harder with what they do compared to like our hardest drug in the R unit was like marijuana. So I can only imagine why they were doing it.
How about you, Brody? Do you know anybody that had charges brought upon them, you know, where they went to the brig or got kicked out?
Yeah, we had all sorts of stuff that happened. Like, we're a combat unit, so we're kind of a little bit more high strung than like a normal unit. We've had 2 guys that had to go to prison for beating the shit out of their wives. That was coming back from Iraq. It was kind of unfortunate because like they didn't really give us resources to deal with that shit. So one of them was at night, like he claims he was sleeping the entire time and he didn't even know what he was doing. We had that. We had a guy that stabbed a Turkish person in a disagreement at a bar. We had destruction of property. This kid kind of went crazy because he didn't want to be there anymore. And he kept on asking to get out and no one listened to him. And so he smashed up his I'm talking every single thing in his barracks room he smashed and then threw a chair out the window and then spit on the American flag and the graves of the soldiers that we lost in Iraq and shaved his head, spray painted a swastika on his chest. And
wow, man.
Yeah. So I'm trying to think of what else.
Balls to the walls on this motherfucker.
That's a big one right there. Because we're pussies in the air wing.
And there was a lot of cheating, a lot of cheating with other people's wives. Because our unit, you could actually bring your wife. They had special barracks that were kind of in the corner of the huge post that we were at, and but there, I mean, like we had one instance where a specialist and a sergeant swapped wives over the course of 2 years, and they were both cheating on each other with their respective wives, and then they all found out, and then they all got divorces, and then they all got remarried to the other person. So, like, but there's a lot of Article 15s for minor stuff, but those are like the major things that I can think of.
Oh my God. Jesus. That's pretty good, man. I gotta admit. This one guy, he got some bullshit charges in Iraq. And they took away his medals, all his campaign ribbons, everything. You know, they really stuck it to him. And so he once again goes out in Oceanside. He starts hanging out with these runaway teenagers, and he starts banging a runaway teenager. And he disappears, and he's gone for like fucking 5 months before they find him. So now I'm pretty sure it's desertion at this point. And they catch the guy, and believe it or not, he's in the gay porn industry king's mansion in San Diego County. He's strung up on fucking meth, and he's got some STD already. And this fucking guy, he's waiting for his court martial, and he came up to the rec center that I was in charge of, the Single Marine program there at Camp Horno. And I know he has like scabies and some other STD. And in the military, if you have an STD, they separate you from certain things, especially a common area like the rec center is. And so he sits on that fucking couch, and I'm like, no, you got to get the fuck out of here. And he's all arguing with me. And I told the corpsman that was playing pool, and the corpsman's like, no, you're a health hazard. Get the fuck out of here.
George Sanderson, please remain motionless. Prepare for...
So he left, and then I sprayed the fucking couch with chemicals and shit and had nobody sit on it for the rest of the night. And the corpsman's like, no, you did the right thing putting that nasty motherfucker out of here, you know, kind of nasty. I mean, it was just, I don't know what happened to the guy, but if anybody has reasons to kill themselves at a young age, this poor bastard, like it was one bad mistake after another. And I don't, this was 20 odd years ago. I just honestly don't know what happened to the motherfucker. Okay, Beth. So now that you know what a guardhouse lawyer is, what's the best advice you got from a guardhouse lawyer?
I don't know about me getting advice, but I always would give advice because of all the dumb things I've kind of done. So being that legal clerk again, like people coming in, I try to make sure I hook up the people that were just like did a mess up one time kind of thing versus those just will not stop like screwing around, being late, and whatever charges are coming their way. I always make sure like to give them the full charges. So if I got people like that, I always try to explain to them this is what is going to keep happening. This is what you should be doing with your life. Always work for the best. I mean, that's kind of like the advice I always give others. But those that weren't that like this is their first time maybe getting in trouble, I always try to like make them feel at ease. I'm like, you screwed up once, but you'll always get for forgiveness later. And they usually get not off the hook, but they don't get as harsher charges as if they should have. So that's kind of what I did.
How about you, Brody? What's the best guardhouse lawyer information you got?
The number one thing, so like our post was small, and our DFAC dining facility was, I mean, I think there was only one person. It was a German local that worked there. Just one person. Okay, so the meals were shit. I mean, horse shit. And I'm sorry to whoever that person was, but I'm sorry, you can't cook. But my Sergeant Phillips, he right away had me fill out this form that basically instead of, because you get your paycheck and they take out so much for the food, you could fill out this form and you get that back, and you permanently can't eat at the DFAC. Or DFAC was shit. So basically, I was getting $500 more a month out of my paycheck because I didn't have to pay for that, and then I could just buy my own food. And most of the time, if you go out, like off base and eat at a restaurant or something like that, the food was fabulous and it was very well priced. So I never went over even like $300. So it technically netted me like $200 a month extra that I used travel and do all this shit with. And that was the number one thing that was like, that made a huge difference in Europe. Thank you, Sergeant Phillips. You're watching.
I kind of caught myself in a pickle. I was doing a contract marriage, and I knew the baby wasn't mine, but there was a possibility it was mine. And so I guess not a contract marriage, but I was doing the right thing, getting her the health insurance in case the kid was mine. And I wanted her to do a test to where they stick a needle into the stomach and pull out a little bit of the fluid. And with that fluid, they can test the DNA of the baby. It had some risk for infection and stuff, but not much. And so I suggested this to my ex-wife, and she told her mom, and her mom calls the Marine Corps saying that I'm abusive, I'm withholding funds, yada, yada, yada. And so when I gave her her monthly check, I made sure it was a check, and my mom got copies of it, and I had bank statements. So I go down to my staff sergeant, barely knew the guy. This was when I was working at the Single Marine program, trying to get out. And he's like, look, you're cleared. I'll take us up to the first sergeant, but I can tell you right now, you're paying her too much. She's only allowed $1,120, not $1,250. So
Wow.
I immediately started sending her less of a check. And then he gave me the information I need. So when she complained about it, I made sure I gave her that fucking form that says, no, I'm only specifically authorized to give you this amount. And she was pretty pissed and everything. But if it wasn't for that staff sergeant, I would have been paying, I think it was $1,250 I was giving her a month at the time.
Right.
Well, that pretty much concludes guardhouse lawyers and crime and people getting kicked out and addiction in the military. Thanks for watching. Make sure you like and subscribe down below.